Thomas & Friends has a lot of characters, and I really do mean a lot. The franchise has been around since 1945, with Edward being the first character created and Grandmother Hat being the newest character in 2024. The franchise is 80 years old now, and over its lifetime, a lot of characters have been created. Some are loved and adored by fans, some are despised, and some are just often overlooked. And no character is more overlooked, in my opinion, than the Tumbleweed. Hello, my name is Z, and welcome to a new, series I'm starting. I don't have a name for it, but the general gist of it is that I answer many unanswered questions about the Thomas franchise. If you guys have seen the Unlucky Tug's Thomas Debunked series, it's kind of like that, but a bit more out there. I've never done this style of video before, so please bear with me while I figure out what the fuck I'm doing. And yes, this is the first time you're hearing my voice, and I'm aware that my voice is garbage, so I recommend that you turn on the closed captions so you can comprehend this video. The Tumbleweed is arguably the most random character in the entire franchise, yet I find it oddly fascinating. It only appeared in Thomas and the Magic Railroad, and was voiced by Neil Crone. While the Tumbleweed does make a brief appearance in All Engines Go, it is just depicted as a regular tumbleweed and not as a character. This is the only character in the whole franchise that is a plant, and it appeared in the director's cut of Thomas and the Magic Railroad, although it has no dialogue. I'm not sure why the filmmakers decided to include this random tumbleweed in the movie, as it serves no real purpose. It was only when Neil Crone improvised lines for the tumbleweed that Britt Allcroft found it humorous enough to include it in the film. Unlike Boulder, which has many speculations within the show's canon that allows for storytelling, the tumbleweed lacks that depth. In this video, I want to see if I can write a story about a random ball of grass in a realistic way. Realistically speaking, tumbleweeds on Sodor would be considered an invasive species and could easily take over the puny island, as one tumbleweed can carry and spread over 250,000 seeds. However, research indicates that tumbleweeds wouldn't survive in the UK anyway for reasons I won't get into. North America experienced this invasive issue firsthand when Russia accidentally introduced the tumbleweed to South Dakota. I think that if you want to write the tumbleweed into the show for whatever reason, you would have to suspend the realistic factor of its inability to survive in the British Isles. I know the franchise and the fandom prefer to maintain a sense of realism unless your name is All Engines Go, but there can be exceptions from time to time. Don't believe me? Class 40 or D4711 in the Railway series has a free-cast number that doesn't exist. So how would I write the Tumbleweed into the series? I would treat the Tumbleweed as a local legend, similar to Proteus. Given that tumbleweeds are dead plants, I think the Tumbleweed could have once been a living plant before transitioning into the ball of debris it is today. Let's use this idea as the basis for the story of the Humble Tumble. Disclaimer, I want to clarify that I know next to nothing about history, and this story is just a fun writing experience for me. If there are any glaring inaccuracies, I apologise in advance. This video was partially inspired by Hero the Japanese Train's video about Boulder, which I highly recommend you watch. My story about the tumbleweed will be much more simpler than his videos, so please don't expect a lot of detail from me. I'm just doing this for fun. There's no need to be so uptight all the time. Anyway, what is the story of the Humble Tumble? Before locomotives even thought about existing in the 18th century, there was a well-respected family in a small village on the island of Sodor. They were wealthy and provided the homeless with free food from their farm. The family of three consisted of a husband, a wife, and their 10-year-old daughter, the latter two of whom loved collecting flowers together in a field near the house. Although the husband never truly understood this passion, he didn't mind as long as his family were happy. Not to mention the flowers were admittedly pretty. The family was very well respected in their local village, and they provided food for the villagers in exchange for some form of payment. But as mentioned before, they were happy to provide for the homeless and unfortunate with free food. However, unbeknownst to everyone, there was another civilization a few miles away that was in desperate need of food and water. They were on a time crunch and could not afford to waste time negotiating with the village to share their food with them. So, to keep things very simple, they planned to raid the village. It was a dark night. The raiders concealed themselves behind the trees surrounding the small village. They had meticulously organised their attack, waiting for everyone to fall asleep. Armed with sacks and weapons, they quietly began breaking into homes, taking whatever supplies they could without being noticed. The largest group targeted the barn, which was like an all-you-can-eat buffet for them, filled with food, seeds, and crops readily available for easy pickings. They managed to fill their large sacks and made a swift escape. However, to prevent any retaliation from the villagers once they discovered the theft, the raiders made the decision to set the village on fire as a precaution. Not long after, the woman of the barn woke up to the smell of smoke. She investigated the strange smell and discovered that the barn was on fire. Panicking, she rushed to her daughter's room, screaming for her to get out and to warn the village. As she bolted to her husband's room, she discovered that his room was already ablaze. A sense of helplessness showered over her as she quickly decided what she needed to do, but there was nothing for her to do but scream in hopes that her husband would act accordingly. The husband woke up immediately, hearing the screams of his wife and the humidity surrounding him. He shouted back to let her know he's awake and to save herself. Reluctantly, the wife ran outside, narrowly avoiding the touchy flames. Luckily, she and her daughter managed to escape the barn in time, but her husband wasn't so lucky and was engulfed by the flames due to the strong winds that night. The family was devastated, having lost their main source of food and their beloved family member. The barn wasn't the only victim of the arson attack, as almost every house in the village was at least damaged in some way, some worse than others. The crops were destroyed, but what hurt the family the most, besides their family member's death, was that their field of flowers was also destroyed. Unfortunately, only a few people died, but the villagers considered it lucky because the death count would have been higher if not for the daughter's immediate response to warn them. Now with wrecked homes and no source of food, the villagers began to feel cold, hungry, and desperate. They understood the plight of the mother and daughter, but that didn't stop them from fighting each other for a single loaf of bread if they still had any, often resulting in injuries or even deaths from brutal attacks or malnutrition. This situation escalated for days, and the mother could no longer bear to witness the chaos. As a last resort, she decided to visit the charred remains of the farm to salvage any food that the thieves hadn't taken. It was no easy task. She had to move the heavy debris all on her own while also being reminded of the death of her husband. After collecting what she could, she distributed the food equally among the villagers and her daughter, neglecting her own health in the process. She believed she had already lived a rich and fulfilling life and wanted the villagers, especially her daughter, to have a similar future. She explained that when she will die, she trusts the villagers would rise from the tragedy and would no longer fight themselves. The villagers accepted her wish and vowed to keep their promise to her. Sadly and unexpectedly, the mother eventually passed away from starvation. The village honoured her sacrifice by planting her favourite flower, the Amaryllidaceae, a flowering plant that makes up tumbleweeds, on her grave. Although the flower field was destroyed, there were still a few flowers that survived the raid, including her favourite one. She was buried next to her husband. Her selfless acts prevented the village from going extinct, enabling the community to grow and thrive as they had more time to cultivate other crops. However, water was scarce during this time due to a boulder blocking a nearby river high in the mountains, which was inaccessible to humans. The village couldn't afford to waste their limited water on the flower, and as a result it began to dry out, turn into a ball, and eventually broke away from its roots, tumbling away from the village. When the villagers discovered the flower was gone, rumours began to spread. One popular rumour suggested that the person who orchestrated the arson attack on the village removed the flower as a sign of disrespect. One night, while a villager was feeding his dogs, he noticed something unusual moving in the distance. Grabbing a weapon in case it was a wild animal threatening him or his crops, he approached and realised it was just a tumbleweed passing by. Relieved that it was nothing serious, he carried on with his night. However, the next morning, the villagers were celebrating the fact that the nearby river was flowing with fresh water again. The man reported his encounter with the tumbleweed, leading to another rumour that whoever encountered the Humble Tumble, as they named it, would bring good luck to the community. They believed the mother's spirit resides in the tumbleweed, granting them this fortune for managing to rise up from a terrible situation and keeping her promise and legacy alive. Since then, on rare occasions, villagers claimed to encounter the Humble Tumble at any time of the day, and good luck would invariably follow each sighting. One such sighting claims that a villager heard the Humble Tumble speak to itself in a Texan accent, but this claim is largely disregarded. While the sighting of the Humble Tumble are still reported in modern times, experts suggest that if a British tumbleweed had ever existed, it is likely extinct now. Given that the legend has endured for at least 3 centuries, it remains unclear whether the Humble Tumble still grants good luck to those who encounter it in modern day. The village, which has since grown into a city, still maintains memorials for both the mother who sacrificed herself for the village and the father who perished in the barn fire. Next to the mother's grave rests her daughters, and though it is unknown what happened to her after the mother's death, it is said she married and lived a normal life with 2 children. Each family member has an amaryllidaceae flower planted on their graves, and these graves are regularly tended to by graveyard attendants who ensure they are hydrated. The legend of the Humble Tumble is still often disputed to this day, with people debating whether the story is real, fake, or misinterpreted. People and engines of Sodor claim they have encountered a tumbleweed casually tumbling around without a care in the world, but these sightings are often disregarded due to the legend being at least 2 centuries old and faking an encounter is really easy nowadays. But what do you guys think? Is the Humble Tumble still around? Okay, I was not expecting the story to be this long, but what do you guys make of this? Do you have your own ideas to share? In this particular story, I aim to make the events parallel the real-life characteristics of tumbleweeds. Tumbleweeds are carried by the wind and are highly flammable, which mirrors the husband's death during the fiery and windy night. The mother sharing her food before starving herself is reminiscent of how tumbleweeds sacrifice themselves to be carried by the wind, effectively planting their seeds. Admittedly, the connection is somewhat loose and requires creative thinking, but I believe it's more meaningful to parallel the life of a tumbleweed within the story, rather than just writing a random narrative. I hope that makes sense. Before I sign off, I want to mention that I have a video project in mind and I'm looking for voice actors to be a part of it. If you're interested and would like more details, I've included a link to a video with all the information you need in the description. That's all I wanted to share. This is Z, signing off.
Howdy, partner. Excuse me, coming through. Pardon me.